Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. Kunjanagri is here. Haribo. And Adishwari Radha. Hari. Hari. Thank you for tuning in. We're getting the band back together, as my Guru Maharaj would say. Hope everyone's well. We are diving into chapter 13 today of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So, read them if you got them. I guess that's my new favorite thing to say. So we're going to start with the Mangalacharna invocation mantras, and then we'll dive into 13.1 and 2. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savaludam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakopa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Bhattitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pongam Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Just gonna take the sweater off. Okay. All right, chapter 13, Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, nature of the enjoyer in consciousness. And I have heard from senior devotees, this may be considered the most esoteric chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, all right. Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetrajnam Evacha Ita Vedittam Ischami Jnanam Gyayam Cha Keshava Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetram Ityabhidhiyate Itadyaveti Tam Brahu Kshetragya Iti Tadvidaha. Arjuna said, "Oh, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Kshetra, the field, Kshetragya, its knower, and knowledge, and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body, or a field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who should not identify himself with the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age he undergoes so many changes of body and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehinosmin, that the living entity is within the body, and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age, And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetragya. Sometimes we think, I am happy, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, and so on, we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities. And the body is called Kshetra, the field of activities itself. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This is also explained. Kshetragyam chabimam vidhi sarvakshetreshu bharata kshetrakshetragyayor jnanam yatas jnanam matam mama. O sign of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Purport. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna says, I am the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or Supersoul. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely, in terms of this Bhagavad Gita, can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Supersoul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh, which means the controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Vedic literature, it is stated as follows: Chitrani sharirani bijam chapi sabashubhe tani veti sayogatma tatakshetragya uchyate. This body is called the Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literature as Jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the supersoul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. Are you awake?
Yeah, I'm reading.
One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of nature is the living entity. And above them both is the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in the Svetashvatara Upanishad 112, Bhokta Bhogyam Peritaram Chamatva Sarvam Proktam Trividham Brahma Metat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva individual soul is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies and there are different owners of the bodies. Because each individual soul has his individual capacity for lording it over material nature, there are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the super soul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Pretty clear. Simple, really. 4. Tat kshatram yascha yadrikcha yadvikari yatascha yat sachayo yat bravavascha tat samasena me shrinu. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, and how the changes are taking place, wherefrom the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the super soul, their different influences, their potentials, and so on. One just has to understand this Bhagavad Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. Rishabir Bahuda Gitam Chandobir Vividhai Pratak Brahmasutra Padashchaiva Itumadbir Vinishchitai. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Titanye. We, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the Supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, the distinction between the soul, the Supersoul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this, and Parashara is considered principal among them. The word Chandogya refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of Kshetragya, the individual living entity and the Supreme Living Entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 251, Brahma Pucham Pratishta. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamoya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then, in Pranamoya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there's Brahman realization called Vijnanamoya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamoya, realization of the all-blissful nature. Thus there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Pucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamoya, Pranamoya, and Jnanamoya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamoya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamoyo Vyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamoya, Pranamoya, Jnanamoya, and Annamoya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamoya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy and dovetailing himself with the Anandamoya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are Na Vyad Ashrutehe, 232, Nat Mashrute, 2318, and Parat Tu Tashrutehe, 2340. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, the second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the Summum Bonum, among all the manifestations of various entities. Any reflections, questions, comments at this point? Anybody? Annamoy, Pranamoy, Jnanamoy, Vijnanamoy, Anandamoya. Annamoy. One depends on food. One realizes the Supreme Lord in food. Jnanamoy. These are good to remember. We should know. And then you can just remember these 5 little things, and then you go and tell somebody, and they'll think, man, this guy or this gal is like a Sanskrit scholar. In Jnanamoya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. That's kind of all he says about it. Realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. My understanding of this is Anamoy means like food consciousness. Like animal is going through walking, like deer. We have a lot of deer that are coming. There's like kind of a wooded area right here between the houses across the street, and then up a hill there's some buildings at the top, but there's like a woods in between. And there's a lot of deer right here, and they come down, and they're just like kind of grazing. They're thinking, where's food? And then they think, what is that? And it's like, oh, where's food? Where's food? It's basically what they're thinking. That's anamoya. Where's food? Just like surviving. And then jnanamoya is my understanding is once you have your basic necessities taken care of, then you start thinking more about like socially, like human beings do, like like feeling awkward, or like feelings, and like politics, thinking, ideas, newspaper, what's going on, this kind of stuff. Jnanamoya. Or sorry, after anamoya is pranamoya. Oops, messed it all up. Pranamoya is after realizing the supreme absolute truth in food, one can realize the absolute truth in the living symptoms or life forms. So I think there's another breakdown of this, and probably I may even talk about it more. But I'm just trying to kind of get my thoughts in order on it. Anamoya, food conscious. Pranamoya is like life conscious to some degree. He said life forms here. Realizing the absolute truth in the living symptoms or life forms. Jnanamoya realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Oh. So it's like, okay, this is alive and this is dead. This is a living thing, this is a dead thing. And then it's like, okay, this is a living thing, and they're thinking, feeling, willing, like deeper insight into the constitution of it. Is it making sense? The Jnanamoya is basically Brahman realization. The living entity is not this body, it's not the feelings that it's having, it's not the thoughts, it's not the form itself. You're not your body. Brahman realization. And then Anandamoya is essentially devotional service. Does that make sense? Is that disagreeing with anybody? No. And I'm just checking the chat. That we are transcendental, it's always in us, but often we don't feel that way. So nice to hear. The point of dovetailing ourselves in Anandamoya. Oops. Okay. Yeah. Basically, it means engaging in devotional service. It's just a matter of how much realization we have of it. I didn't exactly directly share this earlier, but this is it. There's nothing more than what we're doing. This is it. It's just a matter now of doing, practicing, and realizing, wow, going deeper into realization of the holy name. What is the holy name? And then devotional service, even in the simplest form. Just little acts of devotional service. We can do so many of the externals. And then, this is what happens a lot. Krishna tests us. We go through different levels and progress in devotional service. I mean, even we could just be anamoy. We can be out here kind of like, there are people that live in some temples that are basically just like, okay, I'll work in exchange to be able to live. And that's it. They're just thinking about eating, living, shelter, And then the pranamoy, is a little bit higher, and, all these different levels of realization. Up until Vijnanamoya, actually like having some transcendental realization of, oneself as different from the body, and an Anandamoya, bliss of devotional service. Every once in a while you encounter a truly blissed out devotee. Like, wow, I want to eat whatever he's eating, or whatever it is. Someone who's really on the level, like you can, it's a totally different experience. It's just what's happening externally. There's so much internally going on. And on the chat, is Anandamoya the topmost God at bliss and devotional service? Yes, Anandamoya is the topmost. Prabhupada said, transcendental all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamoya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying, Anandamoya Vyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. Basically, in Brahman realization, there's Sat, Chit, Ananda, is what is constituting, the spiritual dynamics and spiritual bodies. Everything is made of Sat, Chit, Ananda. So like in Brahman realization, you get the Sat, the eternality. And there's a little bit more knowledge in the Paramatma realization. But the only way to get to actual Sat, Chit, Ananda is in devotional service. You can have some Ananda in Brahman realization. It's called Brahmananda, but that is not really considered Ananda compared to actual Ananda in devotional service, because we all know the verse. The pleasure in the impersonal realization is definitely there, but it's compared to the water that's in a hoof print of a calf, compared to the ocean of bliss in devotional service. So basically, it's not really considered Ananda because it's practically minuscule, like peanuts compared to the pleasure and the bliss in devotional service. So, okay. Read one. Ma bhuttanya hankaro buddhya vyaktamevacha. Am I in the right one? Yeah. Indriyani dasaikam cha panchachendriya gocharaha. Ischadvesha sukham dukam sangatas chetana dhritihi. Itakshatram samasena savikaram udahratam. Are you with me?
I'm sorry, I lost you.
It's 536, the page. You're on it.
Okay.
The five great elements: false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses in the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then 5 working senses, voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now, the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness, and convictions are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception, or tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhan. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail along with their interactions should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay. And at the last stage, it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetragya, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but I'm going to open it up for questions and comments again. I have to feed this bhakta. Hare Krishna. It's nice to hear. The field of activities. I think mostly it's actually basic. It's just a matter of following, the language that Prabhupada's using. I don't know. Like we're being taught about the senses and stuff. And we have our own. We have a what's the word I'm looking for? We have an understanding that's pre-tuned into the mind. Yeah, I wasn't going to use the word conceived. I was thinking more like something else. But anyway, yeah, it's we've already our mind's already trained to understand that. We have, 5 senses or whatever. And then Prabhupada's saying, well, you have a whole different, it's like a whole different conception of what senses are and which ones are what. And, the knowledge acquiring senses, the working senses, the elements, the gross and subtle elements, the mind and the way it's understood what the mind is and all this stuff. So it seems like a lot of information just to dump in all at once and then expect you to remember all of it. But that's not exactly what we're doing. We're just relishing with great taste the transcendental sound vibration. Relishing Prabhupada's association. So happy. Relishing. So that's the main point. And then, actually by doing that, Krishna reveals the knowledge from within. And then the more we hear, we're going to read Bhagavad Gita. We're nearing the end. Well, we still have some time, but we're like at least 2/3 of the way through. And then we hear Bhagavatam, and then actually all of this will be repeated in Bhagavatam and explained. And by the time you hear Bhagavatam, after hearing this, it'll go in deeper, and it just keeps going in deeper the more you hear until, before you know it, you're walking down the street and you're thinking, oh, you just see somebody smelling something, and then all of a sudden you think, oh yeah, he's using his knowledge acquiring senses there in the wrong way, trying to enjoy or whatever. It just comes to you naturally. So that is the magic of hearing, determined, relishing, Harry Bowl Jai. Harry Bowl. Yeah. Adishwari says it is magic. It really is. Especially, keeping it strong over time. Even if it's, even if it's one day a week, we take like an hour to hear. Any like regular way. Even like the first Friday kirtan, for example, like once a month, a kirtan program, but you do it in a regular way, it becomes so powerful. Especially if you're like literally chanting Hare Krishna every single day. We tend to, kind of not be able to perceive exactly how powerful that is. We're just focused on, tasks that we need to do or whatever, it's just, it depends on our realization, but, we go on chanting. From what I have seen, it's very easy to get into the mindset of like basically like chanting my rounds is just another duty I have. All that may be a transcendental one. There may be like, okay, well, this is for Krishna, and I want to love Krishna, so here I'm doing this. But if we could just keep doing that, then eventually, literally, we could just wake up one day and just completely have our consciousness have been completely changed overnight. It's like a building built on like some soft sand, and then there's like water, slowly eroding it. The house is like, the frame of the house is like anartas and, mindset, different ideas, whatever it is, mentalities. And the consistent chanting is like the water eroding away the sandy ground under the foundation of the building of our anartas. And like, you're just chanting, it seems like nothing's really happening, but then, after 20 years of this erosion, and all of a sudden, the house crumbles just in a matter of seconds. And the same thing can happen and has happened. I've experienced, I've heard from devotees in a very deep way how this has happened to them after they struggled with something for 30, 40, 50 years. They woke up one day and it was gone and never came back. But they kept chanting. And he gave me the example of the building being built on the sandy foundation or whatever. That's amazing. Can you imagine? Chanting is like spending time with Krishna like we are associating now. We just don't have to say anything else but his names. It seriously cleans the heart. Cleanest. Yeah. Yeah, we are. Krishna is not different than his name. Most certainly are associating with Krishna like right now. I had this realization through chanting. I always wanted to be more Krishna conscious. And it came to the point where I was lamenting and frustrated because I wasn't as Krishna conscious as I wanted to be. So anyway, I realized that chanting is Krishna conscious. So I started chanting more, and whenever I would want to be more Krishna conscious, I would just express that desire by chanting, and like basically like, appealing to the Lord, presenting my heart's desire to be more Krishna conscious by chanting with as much sincerity as I could muster. And by doing that over time, regularly, anytime, like just from the heart, like I want to be more Krishna conscious, just Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I'm really chanting Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. And over time, I realized that I started feeling way more satisfied with my situation that I was before unsatisfied with. And then I realized that, yeah, I mean, I shared this recently, but basically, we can be as Krishna conscious as we can basically imagine that we can be right now. Like all that potency is there in the holy name. If we, we have the right mood, sincere desire, and the attentiveness and quality of chanting, we could literally do it right now. It's like actually so natural and simple. And like our minds turn it into this big, huge Herculean task to be Krishna conscious when that's actually like inherent within us. At the same time, we have to understand where we're at and, apply the principles accordingly. We have to understand maybe I'm not at a certain level yet, but there's always a way of applying from where we're at. So I know by now by doing this, you get a higher taste. And even if we're not at the perfect stage in our habits, in our thinking even, with quality of devotion, we can have like serious reciprocation still. Even if we're so, whatever, imperfect, messed up, or whatever, have so many things going on. It's a matter of like quality of hearing and chanting. Even if you got a million other things to do in the day, if you take just like a half hour a day, an hour a day, and really go quality in, it's so powerful. That's why in a certain context and mood, Prabhupada said, just one purely chanted Maha Mantra is better than 16 rounds of inattentive lip service, basically. So it's a really amazing process, just chanting with quality. And we're doing Bhagavatam every morning on Athens Krishna House Facebook Bhagavatam class. And in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, almost in every verse, Prabhupada's saying again and again, he's repeating the process of submissive hearing, submissive oral reception, and chanting. So it's just a matter of really, really trying to dive in the right mood and chanting with the quality. So, alright, if there's no other points, we can end here. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for being here. Harishvari and Nikunja. Nice to have you. And thanks for sharing. And Bhakta Adam. Hare Krishna. So happy, ecstatic that you're relishing so much right now. Alright, so I'm going to end the recording. Hare Krishna.